Hi everybody, it's Nikki here and welcome to a bookish video. So today's video is my April wrap up for the books that I read in April. This is where I go through my statistics for the month and also talk to you about the books that I have read. Now, I was very organised in April and I managed to write down sort of like 3 key words per book. So I was a little bit more on the money what I read in April. So let's go through the statistics. This is my reading journal and we will get to it. So going through the statistics, the total number of books I read in April was 14. The total audio hours of books I don't own a physical copy of was 22 hours and 59 minutes. The total audio hours of books that I do physically own were 13 hours and 51 minutes. Now I do differentiate between the audio hours of owned books and audio hours of unowned books so that I can see that I am using my Scribd, my Audible subscriptions for more than just books that I don't physically own, but books that I do also own as well. The total e-pages was 0. Again, I'm not using my Kindle subscription and that needs to change. So I think I may do a month, maybe not next month, but maybe July, maybe I might just say, okay, the only books I can choose for my TBR have to be ebooks, and then just do a whole month of reading ebooks. So yeah, that has to change because I am paying for Kindle, but I'm not actually using it. The total number of physical pages that I read this month was 2,920. The star ratings I gave no 1 stars. I gave 2 stars. I gave 6 3 stars. I gave 5 4 stars. And I gave 1 5 stars. There was also 1 DNF. The genres, I read no thrillers this month. I read 1 contemporary, 4 middle grades, 1 manga or graphic novel, 2 non-fiction, which I am really happy with, 1 classic, and 5 fantasy sci-fi. The genders of the authors, we had 6 that were male and 7 that were female, and 1 that was an unknown because it's a classic and I'm not sure who wrote it. It doesn't say an author's name on the book. I'll explain later. The origin of the books I read, 11 I physically own a copy and 3 were borrowed. Either from the library as physical books or as audiobooks. The format of the books that I read, 10 I physically read and 4 I listened to on audio. And the binding of the physical owned books that I read, 7 were in paperback and 4 were in hardback. So those are all of my stats. So let's go through all of the books. Let's start with the DNF, and that will be Dark Angel by Eden Maguire. Okay, the back of this doesn't give you a synopsis. It just gives you kind of like a paragraph from the book. So it doesn't really tell you much, but you get the feeling there's a bit of a love triangle going on. She's running away in this beautiful red dress. The title says Dark Angel, so you kind of think it must have something to do with angels. But I swear to you, I got 200 pages through this, halfway through this book, and I still wasn't sure what this book was about. It was so vague and so mysterious. What can it possibly be? That I was lost and confused and didn't know what the hell was going on, apart from these teenagers attending a party and then finding themselves back at home the next day, not knowing how they got back home, but knowing that there's something going on. I'm as confused as they were, and to be honest, I didn't really care about the ending. I found myself already at the halfway point starting to skim words and skim read it, and at that point it was at the end of the month anyway. I think I was reading this the last sort of couple of days of the month, and I just thought, you know what, I just want to get on to my May TBR. I don't even care about finishing this one. So I DNF'd it. It was on my 10 books that will self-destruct in 12 months video. And I said in the update of that it was on my April TBR, so hopefully it would get read. I did attempt it and got halfway through, lost, confused, didn't understand what was going on, and didn't really care to continue. So I did DNF this one. So this one is going to be unhauled from my collection. The next one we're going to talk about is, and this will be the order in which I basically read them. So the first book is Space Oddity by Christopher Edge. Now this is, I think, the third month that I put this on my TBR because I kept not getting to it. So I made it a priority for the beginning of April, and I'm really glad that I read it. It is so much fun. So the keywords I put in this was funny, family, and music. So if you like David Bowie, you're probably going to enjoy this middle grade because this is kind of inspired by his Spaceman song, and David Bowie is highlighted a lot in this book. You get the feeling that they're a fan. So you've got a young boy who is so embarrassed by his dad. His dad's always embarrassing him. And then aliens come to the planet and he suddenly has to kind of go off and rescue his dad. And as I say, it was really funny. I think young children, you know, sort of like ages 9 to 12 would really love this book. And if you enjoy middle grade as well, it's a fun read. I highly recommend it. I gave this 4 stars. It was a really enjoyable read, and the artwork in here as well. I'll show you some artwork close up to the beginning so it doesn't spoil the ending for you. But you know, they go on this camping trip together and he's so embarrassed by his dad. You know, we all are embarrassed by our parents at some point or another. So yeah, I really enjoyed this one. 4 stars. The next one was a library book, and that was Shadow Kiss by Rochelle Mead. This is the 3rd book in the Vampire Academy series, and I really enjoyed this one. I gave this 4 stars. My keywords for this, let me get my thing, says action-packed, stakes are high, and exciting. So as this is the 3rd book in the series, I don't want to tell you too much about it, but the stakes are definitely revving up in this book, and the ending really had me ordering the 4th book from the library practically straight away, and the 4th book is on my May TBR. I'm loving this series, not enough to go out and purchase my own copies. However, if I did come across a really nice box set of these, I might be tempted to pick them up, because these are the kind of books that I could read and reread over and over again and never get bored of them. It's vampires, it's I like the legend of these vampires and their dhampirs who protect them. And I really like the relationships that Rose and Lissa, who are the 2 main female characters in here, have with their friends and romance interests and things like that. So yeah, really enjoyed this. 4 stars. The next book I read was an audiobook, and I finally got around to reading The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. This was a book I listened to on Scribd, and my keywords for this was adorable, understanding differences and acceptance. So this was a story about a man who is, I want to say, quite shielded and quite keeps himself to himself, and he's not very wise to the world, and he's basically a school inspector, but not just any school, it's school for magical children kind of inspector, or more, not schools, sorry, like children's homes for magical children. And he is sent to this house by the Cerulean Sea to inspect this house, and he has the power basically to shut this place down if he wants to, if he feels like it's not a good place. But when he arrives, he realizes that the children in this home are special, and that actually his bosses have an ulterior motive to sending him there. But as he falls in love and starts to care for these children and the owner of the children's home, we start to fall in love with them as well. And it was adorable, and yeah, it's definitely a book about learning to accept people who are different to you, and learning that just because they're different doesn't mean that they're dangerous or that they're something that you should fear. Differences shouldn't mean fear, and I really like that. It is a cute story, and I can see why everybody enjoyed it. I did give it just 3 stars. I don't know if maybe listening to it by audio lost some of that connection for me. I do sometimes worry about when I listen to audiobooks that my ratings are a bit lower, but yeah, I definitely enjoyed it. It was a good book. The next book I read is the one that is the gender unknown, and that is because it is Aesop's Fables. I guess it's written by Aesop. This copy is from the Bath Treasury of Children's Classics. You can get these on Amazon, I've seen, but I picked mine up from the works. Now this is a beautiful copy. It has some absolutely gorgeous artwork, and as you can see, some of the stories are just a couple of lines long. I was advised by one of you lovely subscribers to read just a couple of these at a time, and you were absolutely right, because after a few of these you start to realise how many of these stories are pretty much the same story with the same message, just told differently. And yeah, it got a little bit repetitive. So my keywords were repetitive, people kept in their place, and has a Roman and Greek vibe. Now I don't know the history of Aesop's Fables, where they came from, but I did get this kind of Greek or Roman kind of vibe from it. And there were a couple of stories about don't try to reach beyond your place in life. Don't try to be something that you're not. And it kind of rubbed me a little bit the wrong way, because it was kind of like you're you and I'm me, and you can never be me. Kind of, it didn't feel a good way of keeping people in their place. It was kind of like, you're there and you can't get there, you know? Do you understand what I mean? So I some of them I felt a little uncomfortable with, because it felt like, you know, it was saying stay in your place, don't reach for anything more than that. And I didn't like that, because I'm all about reaching for your dreams, always striving to be better, always striving to get more, as long as you're not standing on anyone or hurting anyone while you get there. You should strive for more. You should try to better yourself. You should try to aim for higher. And some of these stories were saying, you know what, stay where you are. Don't try to make yourself any better. You'll just fail. And I didn't like that. So I did just give this 3 stars. Some of the stories, some of the messages in here were good, and others I was a little uncomfortable with, and I felt they were a little dated, shall I say. So that is that one. The next one was a massive surprise, and that is Page Toon's 5 Years From Now. This is a contemporary, and I don't get on well with contemporary, but I enjoyed this one. I honestly thought I was going to DNF this. I did not. I really enjoyed it. So we have 2 children whose both their parents are divorced. So we have Nell, whose father is living with Van's mother. So it's kind of like a they're not brother and sister, but they're living together as a family, and they're so close. They keep like creeping into each other's beds at night to tell each other stories, and they're really, really close. And then as they grow up, that closeness turns into a romance, and at first people are horrified when they find out. And then as they get older and become adults, because this follows them through from childhood to adults, obviously the older they become, the more accepted it is. I'm not normally one for an incest type storyline, but I didn't, because there was actually no physical relationship to these 2 children. They were just her dad and his mum together after they divorced, you know, their other parent. It didn't seem so creepy to me, so I enjoyed it. It was a really good story. My note says good character building, well handled, and surprisingly good. So that was what I said about that one. I gave that 3 stars. The next one I read was the 3rd book in the Pinch of Magic series, which is A Tangle of Spells by Michelle Harrison. I gave this one 3 stars. I did enjoy this one a bit more than the others. I actually downgraded. Once I finished reading this, I actually downgraded the other 2 books on my Goodreads, because I had them previously at 4 stars, but I feel like this one was the better of the 3, and I only gave this 3 stars. So I ended up changing my Goodreads star rating for the other 2 back down to 3 stars each, because I feel like the whole series was a 3-star type of series for me. So my notes on this says witchcraft, favourite one of all 3, and fun. So yeah, this one does deal with witchcraft, and this painting that is locked away in a room. It was really good, but kind of a little bit forgettable, to be honest. I kind of have already forgotten what it was about. But yeah, this is probably going to be unhauled. I do have all 3 books. The second one and the third one have these beautiful sprayed edges, but the first one is just plain edges. I think I will probably unhaul all 3 books and donate them to a local children's school, because I feel like they would get more enjoyment out of these books than I will. It's probably not a series I'm going to want to reread in the future, but it was enjoyable. It was okay. So 3 stars. The next one I read was on Audible, and it was my book club pick for the month, and that was Hidden Figures, the story of the women, the Black American women who helped NASA get into space. And this was written by Margot Lee Shetterly. It was a non-fiction, and this, I chose this book for my Learn Something New prompt from Buckingham. And the thing that I learned was I'm really bored when people start talking about science and maths. Who knew? Yeah, I was so bored. I can understand its importance as a story for Black American men and women to understand their vital and important part of getting the Americans into space, especially after they were embarrassed because Russia actually got into space first, and so the Americans had to quickly, you know, jump on the ball and try and get a man on the moon before anybody else. So yeah, it has its special place in history. I get that, but for my own personal enjoyment, maths and science and space really bore me. So I personally gave this a 2 stars, but on Goodreads I marked it as 3 stars because I don't want my personal enjoyment to stop other people from picking this up who might be actually interested in space or maths or engineering or science, that sort of thing. So yeah, if you do like maths and science and engineering and the space race, this would be more up your street. I know the other ladies in the book club enjoyed it. I think one of them gave it 4 stars. So it just goes to show it depends on what your personal interests are. And mine, I learned something new. I don't enjoy I don't enjoy space or engineering or science or maths. The next book I read, oh, I so very, very nearly DNF this. Oh, by the way, the 3 key elements from Hidden Figures that I wrote down was important to Black female and male history, science and maths, for me, uninteresting. Pretty much what I said. So the next book, yes, I almost DNF this. The Beast of Buckingham Palace by David Walliams. Okay, so the reason why I've been like hating on this before I've even read it is because I'm not very much a fan of David Walliams' sense of humour. He does stupid slapstick humour, and I don't like that kind of humour. I'm more of a ha-ha funny joke kind of humour. And the keywords I have for this are slapstick, basic storytelling, and too many sound effects. Okay, so there is a part, I'll show you this bit. Like, look at this. Like, doink, 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 doink. And then you've got the picture here. Doink, 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 doink. You know those old Batman and Robin TV programs where when they were in the fight scene, you would get these flashes of words up going bang, wham, whop. You know, all of those. That's what this book does. And it does it in abundance. Like, I listened to this on audio because I thought it would be the only way I would get through it. What a mistake that was, because not only did they have the sound effects that were written in the book, but they also had sound effects of what they were doing in the book. So if someone was like bringing in a tea tray, you would hear a clinkle, clinkle, clinkle as the teapot, you know, was rattling on the tray, or footsteps coming down the hallway. And it was just like, oh my God. I mean, the good thing about the audio was that it had a full cast. So you had like Joanna Lumley as the Queen, and you had different voices for the enemy and different voices for the kids and things like that. So it had a full cast. It was like the whole thing was a show being put on for you. And some people might enjoy that, but for me, it was too much. it was just like a cacophony of noise in my ears, and I didn't enjoy it. The storytelling in this is also really, really basic. Like, I feel like I could pick up a pen and piece of paper and write something very similar to this. I'm no storyteller, and I haven't sold thousands of books, no. But I could write something very similar to this. It just wasn't... I know it's for kids, but this was so basic. A toddler would read this. Do you know what I mean? I didn't enjoy it. I gave it 2 stars, and I'm going to be unhauling it. That one's definitely going to be unhauled very, very quickly. The next one I read was my non-fiction, and this was William III and Mary II by Jonathan Keats. William III and Mary II were the only English monarchies to rule together. Other couples that were ruling the country, one would be the king or the queen, and the other one would be the royal consort. So they ruled between 1688 and 1702, and this was really interesting because we don't get to hear very much about their rule because it was uneventful. Despite the fact that William III basically dethroned Mary's father to take the throne. Apart from that, their reign was pretty good. Like, no scandals, no infighting, nothing like that. So it was a very they called it the Glorious Revolution because nobody died. Nobody actually fought. William III did come over from Denmark, I think it was, to take the throne, but the king just literally absconded. James II, that was the king, Mary II's father, James II. He basically just went, "Oh, he's coming, I'm off, see ya, bye," and left. So there's no real battles, no real fights. Nobody really died, so that's why they called it the Glorious Revolution, because nobody really died for their reign to start. So it was really interesting to see what happened. So yeah, and Mary II, what a woman. William III did cheat on her, but it was accepted in those days for the king to have a mistress, and Mary II just kind of accepted it. There was no scandal there. She just accepted it for what it was because she couldn't produce an heir. So yeah, I really enjoyed this, gave it 3 stars. My notes say interesting, non-violent revolution and an underhyped couple. I thought it was really interesting. The next book I read was my 5-star of the month, and that was Vanishing of Griffins. My copy is already starting to lose the foil on the title there. So this is the sequel to A Darkness of Dragons by S.A. Patrick, and this continues Patch Brightwater's story. So we have Patch Brightwater and his friends Wren and Bava. Bava has my heart, he always will. And in this one, I had to read a little excerpt of this out to my book club friends because I'm trying to convince them to carry on with this trilogy. I believe it's going to be a trilogy. There's another book coming next year, I think. And I had to read an excerpt out because it just made me laugh out loud. There was just one point where I was giggling. I read that part to my husband. I read it to the book club people. I loved it. I cannot stress enough how much I loved this book. So my keywords for this say laugh out loud funny, plot twists and world building. So yeah, there's a couple of twists in here that really send the story off in another direction, and the world building in this is a lot better because we get to explore the world a lot more. I won't go into exactly what happens in the story because it is a sequel, but yeah, definitely a lot of moments where I actually frightened my husband because I actually laughed out loud. So yeah, highly recommend this series. The first book is A Darkness of Dragons by S.A. Patrick. 5 stars. The next book was my buddy read with Charlotte, and that is My Soul to Keep by Rachel Vincent. This is the 3rd book in the Soul Screamers series. We have been buddy reading the first 3 books of this. We have decided that although there are a few more books in this series that we both now own on our Kindles, we're both going to give it a break for a while. And the reason for that is because although the first book started off good and strong, the second and the third book both fell into a kind of a trap of telling teenagers what they should and shouldn't do. Like the second book, the first book introduces us to the main characters, who are banshees, and their legend of their screaming for people's souls when they die, and it was really interesting, and I really liked this idea of the banshees and grim reapers working together, and but then the second book, as I say, went into this kind of storyline of how you shouldn't sell your soul to the devil for rich and fame, because you will, when you die, you will be tortured forever. And then this third book fell into the, don't do drugs. But the twist in this is that it's not just any drugs, it's demons drugs. So it feels a bit more like a manual for children and how not to behave, and it's a little obvious with that as well. It's not like beautifully blended into the story. It does really feel like a lecture, like a teacher-student lecture of not to do drugs, but in a fantasy setting. I mean, it was interesting. I probably will pick up the rest of the series at some point. As I say, I have them on my Kindle, but I gave this one 3 stars, and we are going to be reading something else for the month of May. Not in that series though. My keywords for this was, it picked up at the end, deals with teenage problems, and this annoying need of not to tell anybody anything. That was another thing that was very frustrating. It happened in the second book, and it happened again in the third book. These teenage angsty problems were happening, but oh my God, we can't tell my dad, we can't tell my best friend what is happening, even though my best friend is in danger. I can't tell her the truth of what's actually happening, even though her best friend knew she was a banshee, but she couldn't tell her best friend that there was a demon's drug going around the school. Oh, it was just, can't tell anybody. I must keep it all to myself. I must deal with the problem myself. Nobody else can save the day. Oh, it was just too much. And that was that one. The next book I read, I kind of did myself a 24-hour readathon or a 48-hour readathon just to try and get some books like in at the end of the month to try and bump up my numbers. This was one of the books that I read, and it is How the King of Elfhame Learned to Hate Stories by Holly Black. This is the Waterstones Black edition of this book. Absolutely stunning. I loved this. I gave this 4 stars. My notes on this was there was one story that is repeated throughout, but told different ways each time. It was easy to read, and there is beautiful artwork inside. So the artwork was done by Ravina Kai, I want to say. There's her name at the bottom. And yeah, there's absolutely stunning artwork in here. And what I really liked was at the back of the book, they even did some concept artwork here to show how they developed Cardan's look in here. So this does sort of tell the story of Prince Cardan from the Cruel Prince trilogy, the Folk of the Air series. From when he was a young child up until the point where he's with Jude. As I say, there is one story told many different ways throughout this book. And the way that the story is used is kind of to show that stories have different endings and different meanings depending on the point of view that you look at the story. So I really liked that concept. I really liked this idea that a story is not something set in stone. It's alive and it's living. And yeah, it was brilliant, and I loved it so much. I absolutely love the Folk in the Air series, and this is a great added book to that series. Do you need to read this in order to read like the original trilogy of The Cruel Prince, The Wicked King and The Queen of Nothing? No, you do not. Does this add anything extra to the story? Not to the original trilogy, but definitely something more of an understanding of Cardan. One thing I don't like authors doing is going back to a story that they've already written and then rewriting the story from somebody else's point of view. So it's been done recently by the Twilight author. She released Midnight Sun, which was basically Edward's view of the story. And then I think the 50 Shades of Grey story also got a book written from Christian Grey's point of view. I don't like them. I don't want to read the same story twice, not even from somebody else's viewpoint. This, however, you had moments where you were getting part of the same story as you got in the Folk of the Air series, but it was such a small clip of it that it didn't feel like I was reading the same story as before. I did feel like I got more from this and more understanding of Prince Cardan through this. So yeah, 4 stars, really enjoyed it. The next book I read was Death Note in the Black Edition, Volume 5. So this is actually volumes 9 and 10. Yeah, 9 and 10. So my notes on this says the plot has thickened, there's new characters, but it's confusing at times. I did give this a 4 stars. Obviously, we are almost to the end of this series now. I only have one more book in the Black Edition set to read, so we are nearing the end of the story. So I can't really go into too much detail about what this story is about. But the Death Note is a book that is held by the Shinigami gods. There are multiple Shinigami gods. And one day, one of them called Rook drops his Death Note into the human world to see if a human will pick it up and see what a human would do with a Death Note. The Death Note book is a place where if you write down someone's name and you have that person pictured in your head, they will die within 30 seconds of a heart attack. Or in 30 minutes of a heart attack, something like that. And we have this young boy called Light Yagami who picks up the Death Note and decides to use it to rid the world of criminals. However, you can't go about doing act. You can't kill criminals. That makes you a criminal. So obviously the police get involved and it becomes a game of cat and mouse, really. And I really enjoyed this. As I say, at some points I did get a little confused with who was who, and I did have to kind of go back to the 4th book just to read the end of it, because there was a character missing in here and I was like, where did they go? And so I had to go back to number 4 and just remind myself what happened. But yeah, I really do enjoy this series. I do have the series on DVD, so once I have finished reading the books, I will then go and watch the series, the anime, and enjoy the story from that physical, audible way. But at least I'll know what the story is when I go into it. So yeah, really enjoyed this, gave this 4 stars. And the final book that I read for the month was Girl Serpentthorne by Melissa Bashadoost. This was a Fairy Loot exclusive edition, so it has beautiful sprayed edges. I gave this 4 stars. I really enjoyed this. I don't know if this is a standalone or if there is going to be another book. I'm not sure. I will have to check that out. But it's my notes say, learning to love yourself, warts and all, and a humanized villain and sapphic. So there is a female romance in here, which was done really well. I really like that, the way that it was played out. And yeah, a very humanized villain. The villain, you kind of felt sorry for them, but then didn't feel sorry for them all at the same time. And also our main female protagonist in this is born poisonous to the touch, so nobody can touch her or they will be poisoned and die almost instantaneously. And so because of that, she has been kept hidden in the castle, because if she's a princess, by the way, I forgot to mention, if the common people or the royal family's enemies find out that they have a poisonous princess, then, you know, their reputation will be ruined, and you know, and they will be brought into war. So they have to hide her away. But we learn through the story that all is not as it seems, and that there is someone down in the dungeon who knows more about her story than what she's been told so far. And it's a story basically about her finding herself and accepting herself, because she starts off the story wanting to get rid of this curse that she has, but by the end of the book she is more accepting, shall we say. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. I will definitely keep this copy and probably reread again in the future. It was beautiful. As I say, I don't know if this is a standalone or if this is the start of a series, but if it is the start of a series, I would definitely be interested in reading more. But whatever, I would be definitely interested in reading more of this author's work. I gave this 4 stars, and that is the last book on my April wrap-up. So I've waffled on for long enough. I hope that this way of me making these notes of these books has helped a little bit more to help you decide if any of these books are of any interest to you. It definitely helped me when I was trying to remember what to say about these books, rather than, yeah, I enjoyed it. Or no, I didn't and I DNF'd. But yeah, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like, comment and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!